What's up everybody, Tom here with another video. Today we'll be talking about the latest stock market news, along with our technical analysis thoughts on the S&P 500, NASDAQ, gold, the Volatility Index, and Tesla. Tesla's battery day is upon us, so will we see another case of buy the rumor, sell the news? Let's take a look together at Tesla right now. Things are certainly getting interesting in the stock market. Stay tuned. So as we like to do on this channel, we of course like to try to simplify what's happening in the stock market together. One of the ways that we can always do that is by having a look at the heat map of the S&P 500 over the last 24 hours to get a bit of an idea of what's currently going on in market sentiment and what's hot and what's not. So yesterday we saw a huge amount of crazy moves. We actually saw things like Apple, which ended the day up 3%, sell off down to 103.20-ish in the pre-market, and then buy up and then sell off again through the first hour of trade. It ended pretty strong, as did Microsoft, as did most of the FANG stocks. And the story was, with Jerome Powell obviously coming out and answering some questions, was that banks really suffered. We saw a whole bunch of financials go down, healthcare plans, industrials, aerospace defense, basic materials, a whole bunch of stocks that have been doing quite well recently started to sell off as people started to maybe potentially see a bit of value in some of these tech stock dumps during the last couple of weeks. So let's take a look around the markets just to see what's been going on, see if there's any clear indicators of why we saw that initial sell-off and what's happening right now in the stock market. We'll obviously be looking at the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 very soon, along with Tesla as well. So here's the VIX or Volatility Index. Now we saw the market spike quite high. It got upwards of 31.2 and then sold off pretty aggressively at the end of the day as the stock markets recovered somewhat in the last couple of hours of trade. This is pretty normal for the VIX. The VIX moves incredibly aggressively up in terms of spiking and then moves, of course, quite aggressively down. And we do expect this type of thing. Remember, we saw a similar pattern over here where the VIX would spike up and then sell off very aggressively and spike up and sell off very aggressively as it came down to kind of its median point being that 20. While it's above the 20 though, we still have incredible volatility in the market, and I still think that at any point we could see a flash crash between 3 to 5% just because the VIX is so high and it's clearly showing a lot of implied volatility. The real story at the moment though is probably the US dollar index, and it's something that even if you trade stocks, you should certainly be looking at. What we're seeing on the US dollar index is basically a bunch of bulling buying pressure. We're actually testing now almost highs, which is this 93.80 zone and 50 exponential moving averages, blue line. If we see dollar index crack this zone, I think that it's a very, very, very strong signal for a lot of risk off in markets, in growth, in those types of things. And we haven't seen the dollar be strong for quite a few months now, since of course the Fed started really crushing the dollar with their fiscal policy. If we take a look at what could happen, we could see a bounce if it gets above 93.80, closes above, it comes back down, tests the previous resistance, that becomes support, and we could go to 95 or even 96 where previous support will become resistance again. And this is the nature of quality structure points in the market. We've got a lot of accumulation down here of the US dollar. There's always key critical moments that happen, and then you usually see fills in the market, and we're really approaching one of those right now in US dollar in terms of analysis. If you jump down into the 1 hour as well, what you'll notice is that there was a huge amount of buying pressure coming off a very critical point. If we move this horizontal line down here, notice this 92.80 zone. Heaps of supports here on the 1 hour, very nice zone, followed by a slingshot effect. And right now we're really just trading and consolidating above previous resistance. So that resistance is becoming support as the 20 moving average catches price and it takes a bit of a breather. What about other metals out there? Well, of course, copper is really just finding support back on its 20. We use this as a bit of an idea of whether we're in a corrective phase or a crash in the market. And right now it looks quite corrective. And we've spoken about copper quite a lot. So I'm not too concerned about price here. It looks pretty normal. But what I want to really talk to everybody about today is this idea of course, buy the rumor, sell the news. And why is this occur and what is it telling us? Well, of course, Musk's talking about Tesla's battery day and he's saying that it won't reach serious high volume until 2022. So this is a tweet that came in yesterday from Elon Musk. This battery day is a massive thing for sentiment in Tesla's market, and we know that Tesla, while it may remain bullish longer term, we are seeing incredible volatility each way depending on this event. We'll be taking a look at the technicals in just a second for Tesla, but one of the things I want to discuss is this idea that traders, institutions, hedge funds all bid up price when they're looking at, of course, doing a buy the rumor, sell the news type of event. So they basically buy all of the price, they get it to a point where the market has to have such an amazing result for it to hold that price, and most times it disappoints, they sell out, and of course they take profit from retail traders and other people that are just long holding those positions overall. So will this happen on Tesla? Well, it has happened before. If we look back at things like Model 3 news, other hyped up events that of course were then battered by the media, we need to remember the media plays a big role in the way that sentiment is driven on stocks. It still does. Now, the media might get hold of a story, it doesn't meet expectations, they bash the stock, it takes an effect on the stock and of course creates that sell the news type of event. So let's now have a look at the top-down analysis on Tesla using the monthly, weekly into the smaller timeframes to find out what could happen during this event overall. So here we're on the weekly. The monthly obviously just shows pretty much a vertical line, and the weekly starts to show a few things that are interesting. Number 1 point, we're basically at a resistance point that we have not seen a body close above. If we zoom in, you'll know that body closes are the most important thing when it comes to candle confirmations. Notice how previous body close was found as support recently during the sell-off. Right now, we're testing on the weekly this 450 high. We're basically seeing body closes around that zone, and we're right on it ahead of the battery day event news. Let's dive into the 1 day and see what's happening there. Well, basically yesterday we had a sell-off. It came to the 20 exponential moving average, this red line here, bought off, and finished the day very similarly to where it started. With Tesla, because of the current market structure and fastness of the market, you need to probably go down to something like a 4 hour to really get an idea of what the market's telling you. So I think there's always a tale of two stories in the technicals, but this is what could happen in terms of the battery day event. We've got here a 454, 455 kind of resistance high with a bunch of body closes and wicks around this zone. We also have a key critical point now underneath here, which is effectively the trough zone in between what could be a little double top here on Tesla. So we've got here a 455, we've got resistance, what was resistance, we've obviously got a trough, which is acting as support right now, and we had support yesterday from this 410 zone. It's a little bit of market structure around the 420, but overall, these now are kind of becoming the most important structure zones for trapping Tesla right now. Now, what could we see? Well, if we have Tesla come out of the gates very, very strong, what will probably happen is price will bull up, break and close above the 454, 455 zone, come back, test the previous resistance as what we call role reversal as support, and then I would not be surprised at all if it bulls at that point into 500, where it will most likely find some form of resistance selling. Now, if we see the opposite and the market just gets disappointed straight away, we go through that 410 zone. Where does that really open up Tesla to go to? Well, previous market kind of support over here and previous market supports over here, being the 375, certainly could become open, or even as low as the previous low over here, which is that 330, where previous market resistance is at in terms of the best structure zone. So this is probably the best structure area, this 330 to 340 zone, but overall this would become a double top, and you would see at least that distance. So if we took that distance, got a little trend line up here, took the distance of that move, and then extrapolated that out, what's that saying to us? Well, it's saying at least down into this previous structure here where it would hit 200, but I think you could even overshoot that and get back into the 340 range and test this area plus the previous resistances. So there's a lot at stake here for Tesla traders. Will they see new highs? 500 probably becomes that strong psychological resistance zone. And then of course, underneath that, we've got the previous resistance, so it could become support again, market structures. I'd also like to just go over to a daily and talk about what happened recently in terms of this big move on Tesla, because we also could be in a blow off into the news. And what a blow off means is that we had such a massive stock rise, then we have a massive kind of stock fall very, very quickly. and then that gets picked up, and usually a blow-off event occurs between a 78.6 and a 61.8 fib. So this range here is usually where we see selling pressure come back into the stock, and then the stock most likely ends up returning back into the previous lows. It did that on gold recently, which we'll be taking a look at. It does that in most blow-off events. If you ever see a stock sell usually around 20% in a week or not a couple of days, you're usually in a blow-off event, especially after a huge move. It's usually a huge move, massive sell-off event. It picks up very quickly because of buy the dip sentiment, and then it sells off again. So what about gold? What is gold telling us? Well, gold had that massive sell-off as well, and this is all off that previous buy into, of course, the blow-off event. You put the fib over here, the same things are happening as it is in Tesla. But I'm more interested in what's happening right now. So right now we have here, let's go to the 4 hour and just take a quick look at what the market's showing us. So the market's previous support levels being all the way around this kind of 1920 zone just underneath, I've found huge amounts of support. In fact, we have a huge amount of body closes around 1920. So the market's just hit the 1920 and sold off. And that makes sense. Previous supports are all acting now as resistance, and we would probably expect dollar index to strengthen and therefore gold to potentially weaken back down to where it flashed last night. So right now it's really looking at that point where you would expect rollover on silver and gold and potentially even Bitcoin down to their previous supports. Bitcoin could go downwards of 10K where it has huge buying pressure as well. So gold's really at that key point, and that's very similar to what we're seeing on the market, on Apple, and of course the NASDAQ. So let's have a look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ sold off. It did not get down as low as we'd hoped, which is that 10-4 area previous market structure, which is what the channel pattern is telling us. This is the futures. We do have a bullish hammer here, but with bullish hammers, we know that they're not necessarily as strong as everyone makes them out to be. We've seen them fail a lot in this particular market over the last couple of months since really the crisis. If we take a look at a horizontal line, we bring that onto the charts, what are we seeing right now? Well, the market has caught back up to a 4 hour 20 exponential moving average. It found resistance there before. We're basically testing what was previous support as resistance again. And we've also seen here on the small 4 hour, a little shooting star towards the negative. So it's really crunch time for the NASDAQ to show further weakness. If it doesn't show further weakness at this 11,000, 10,990 area, we will probably see it go above the 11.2. And if it does go above the 11.2, all of a sudden it really opens up previous resistance up here, and we're back in buying kind of territory where the market is buying the dip and potentially the lows are in. So for now, we want, if you're a bear or you're a dip buyer, you really want this level to hold and further selling to come into the market over the next couple of days, at least on the NASDAQ. The real target still remains a very, very similar kind of point, which is you take the channel range, you extrapolate that out using, of course, the trend line, and then that should proof in the market structure, which it does in this case, and it pushes it back down into the 10.4 previous supports, acting as support again. So we're still really aiming for that in the NASDAQ. Time will tell whether it does happen. Let's take a look at Apple now. What's Apple telling us? Well, Apple obviously broke low and it got underneath the 110 support. The 110 support was the 50 exponential. And just like the NASDAQ, notice how Apple has bought back into the 110 support. If we go down to a 4 hour, it's a very similar story. Previous supports all acting as resistance, but here we've got even more resistance. We have a 20 exponential moving average and a 200 simple moving average on the 4 hour, all intersecting together at the same point. That's pretty good, and that's pretty key. It needs to hold this level in terms of the resistance needs to hold here, and we should see further selling pressure on Apple if this technical is going to hold up. Previous support and resistance with 2 MAs is the kind of thing that you usually look for, but of course a lot of sentiment will come from the Fed and from Jerome this week. But overall, that's a technical that you usually would be paying attention to and, of course, looking at. On to the market that we all care about, the S&P 500. What's going on there? The S&P 500 has been actually a bit weaker than the NASDAQ. It hasn't come back to its 4 hour 20 yet. We have seen already some weakness in futures trading now, but it remains that 33.20, which was previous support, will act as some form of resistance most likely. And we did hit one important figure last night, and that was that we hit the 20 exponential weekly moving average and bounce straight off that. So we were really trying to aim for around that 3,200 into the 20 moving average. It bought straight off the 20 moving average here, but overall, it's still kind of in that zone where we've got to close now below the previous market structure. It's looking bearish for now anyway, and it should still come down to market structure overall. Previous resistances should act as support, and that's around that 3,200 zone, similar to where we see a monthly S2 pivot as well. So there's so much going on in the stock market right now, and it's certainly pretty exciting. So if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to, of course, subscribe and hit that alert button. Just a quick reminder, we're approaching 20K thanks to the support of the community. And last night during the live stream, a viewer actually gave us an extra 20 on top of that. So we'll be giving away $520 thanks to Shane out there. Quick shout out. Thanks everyone to the community for supporting the channel. We'll be doing live streams throughout the week and of course bringing you more content on what's happening in the markets right now. Will we see that buy the rumor, sell the news? Time will tell on Tesla, but it's certainly going to be fireworks. See you soon and happy trading. Bye for now.